I'm Ethan Cole, the president of the Product Managers Association Los Angeles. Welcome for joining us here at our noon event. I'm really excited to have Jackie speak to us. Real quick announcements. Our next event is going to be Kaylin Burns, one of our own PMA members, speaking on building better product culture, why extreme programming isn't just for engineers. So we haven't had a date set for that yet. The best way to learn about our new events and the timing of them are to sign up for our newsletter. So go to pma.la and you can join us there. Another thing we do is we share ideas and opportunities. Really excited to announce that I'm actually hiring for my team. I've recently joined Open Drives in Culver City. We're looking to hire an associate product manager and a project manager. It'd be wonderful if we could hire someone from the LA area, from the PMA community. If you have opportunities of your own, please enter them into the chat so we can share some of these opportunities and help our own, especially in these times. In addition to the network events and opportunities, we also have a mentorship program. Really excited. We're wrapping up our winter session. We have, I believe, 84 mentors and mentees connected. Again, this is for underrepresented undergrads who are interested in joining product management. We're pairing them up with our own members to help create a more diverse next generation of product managers. If you're interested in being a mentor, or if you know a mentee, someone who's in that population and an undergrad, our applications start March 22nd, and you have up until April 15th. Really exciting to have that program. And please, if you can give back, please give back. If you can share this information to someone who might need it, please do that as well. And then last but not least, I want to thank our sponsor, Pragmatic Institute. They've been terrific to us. I took the course recently. It's a great course. It's a lot of thought-provoking, a lot of frameworks that they share with you and take away and provide to your day-to-day. So really recommend the Pragmatic Institute's Foundations course. I found it helpful myself. And before I leave, just really want to thank Jackie for joining us today. If you don't have her books, go out and get them. I have both of them. The Cracking the PM interview, I recently got a position. Spoiler alert, I absolutely use that. I would hope that anyone who's interviewing with me also reads through it, because it's some terrific tips and ideas of how to do it better. And for the Cracking the PM career, again, this is going to be a textbook for product courses for the future. Absolutely recommend it. It's on my book. It's highlighted. There's notes written inside of it. Get this book, get both these books, and we're really excited to have Jackie speak to us. She's a rock star. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Ethan. And just to echo what Ethan said about the mentorship program, it's an awesome program. The opportunity to mentor somebody, the way it feels to be able to give back to someone. And it doesn't matter where you are in your career. It's not about just senior leaders mentoring people at any stage in your career. Particularly in this case, we're dealing with people who are undergrads. Wherever you are, and even if you've made a ton of mistakes, I always tell people in coaching sessions that I do, learn to not do what I did, right? Find somebody like Jackie has clearly made a ton of right moves. You can also learn from me as what not to do. There's some great lessons in there. So didn't want to echo about the mentorship program. So we move on to the main event here. So we're lucky today to have Jackie as our guest. Just a quick bio on her. Early in her career, Jackie served as a variety of product management roles at Microsoft and Google, and most recently, she was the head of product management at Asana. So when she joined the company, she was the first product person there and ultimately built it to an organization of over 20 people. But probably more importantly, she helped drive the company from $0 in revenue to $100 million in annual recurring revenue. Right? We care about outcomes, not outputs. So as Ethan mentioned, you may all know her from her wildly successful first book, Cracking the PM Interview. That's where she helped you get your dream PM gig. And like a good product person, she's optimizing the user journey. She followed it up with a sequel called Cracking the PM Career. And this is a book that'll help you thrive in your new job and navigate your way throughout the roles that you're going to encounter through your career ascension. So I'm going to hand it over to Jackie. She's going to she's got some slides to kind of walk through some highlights that she has from the book. There's a Q&A feature in Zoom that I'm sure you're all familiar with. If you've got questions after Jackie's presentation, we'll take questions from the audience, and she's going to field them rapid fire AMA style. Jackie, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome, great. And I think I need screen sharing permission. Sorry, I didn't check that earlier.
No worries, I can fix that now.
Great. Awesome. I'm so excited to be here and talking to everybody today. And let me just pull up my my slides. So yeah, I was going to talk about some of the things I learned along my career. And David, I've made lots of mistakes in my career, a lot of things that I learned from. And in fact, that was a lot of the inspiration for both of these books, were times when I made mistakes and I sort of asked, like, how did I make that mistake? What did I misunderstand? What did I not get about what it takes to either, land the job, what the interviews are really about, or about what it takes to succeed as a PM, about what the skills are, or what the growth path of a PM even looks like. So yeah, you already talked a little about my background. I've been lots of different places, and people always ask how I got into product management. And I was one of the lucky people who was able to get a job right out of undergrad. I had a friend who said, Jackie, you need to apply for this internship. And I had no idea what the role was. I didn't think that I could possibly apply to something with the word manager in the title. And I was very lucky that he kind of pushed me into the role, and that encouraged me to apply and eventually become a full-time product manager. So I wanted to just jump right into some things that I've learned about being a successful product manager. So early on in my career, one of the first mistakes I made is I remember working with a designer, and I used to draw out the mocks and come up with these solutions and hand it over to her and say, like, okay, great, like, go do your design magic on these. And she said, Jackie, you're taking away the fun part of my job. I want you to bring me problems and not solutions. And that really sort of changed how I think about the role of a product manager. That our job isn't to solve the problem, it's to set up the context, to really start with the goals and figure out why are we going after this problem, and what kind of problems are worth going after. And related to this is this idea that as a PM, we're not usually handed problems to solve. We have to go find them. And so that might mean that a customer comes and asks for a feature request, but it might even mean that an executive comes to us in the hallway. And I've had this happen. I had a VP stopped me at my first job and said, Jackie, you have to build this new API. And I was so excited. I was like, the VP knows what our team is working on. They're excited. They have an idea for it. So I ran to our team and I'm like, we have to build this. The VP asked for it. And the people on my team were not as impressed. I was a little surprised. And that's when I learned that just because an executive said so is not a good enough reason to build something. And what it really is, our job as a product manager is when we're asked to build a feature, it's our job to reverse engineer the problem from that feature, to go up a level, to figure out why did they ask for this. Sometimes we can talk to them directly. Sometimes we need to do our own independent research, but to figure out what was the problem they wanted to have solved and create the space so that our team can explore multiple solutions. And some of those solutions might be worse than the original idea. Some of them might be better, but it really gives us a space to possibly come up with better ideas and to really deeply understand why we're doing the work we are, which lets us come up with better results. And not only do we get better results from approaching the role like this, but this is also how we scale. By empowering the engineers and designers on our team to come up with their own solutions, we're able to scale ourselves so that we have more time to work on bigger and better things. The next thing is this importance of validating your ideas. So when I was a new PM, I thought that the role of the product manager was to come up with all the best ideas. This is what it took to really pass all the interviews, right? Is to have the great design ideas, to have those insights. But what I learned is, and I've seen this over all of my years of being a product manager and a manager of managers and a people manager, is that the best PMs are not the ones who come up with the best ideas. Even the absolute best PMs with the most amazing product sense are often wrong about their ideas. In fact, they come up with so many ideas that, of course, many of them might be wrong. But what really distinguishes the best PMs from the ones who aren't as successful is that the best PMs are able to validate their ideas. They're able to double check those ideas with real people and very quickly determine which ideas are promising, which ones aren't, and based on what they learn to iterate to come up with even better solutions. So if your idea fails and if you like run an A/B test and it's not successful, that doesn't mean that you as a product manager failed. With that, the real failure is if you run these tests and you don't learn anything from them. If you're able to learn from them and use that to build and advance your knowledge so that the next idea you have can be more successful, that's what really makes a great product manager. The next thing I learned is that I used to think that you have to either sort of be born with creativity or you're not. And I went and I talked to people, and what really surprised me is that when I heard people have really creative and innovative ideas, a lot of the time it wasn't that this idea came out of nowhere. It's that they had the idea that they'd seen it in another product somewhere. And sometimes it's a product in an entirely different domain. So maybe they're working on a productivity app and they got an idea from a game or from a music app. And they were able to bring those UI metaphors or those solutions into the product and find ways that when they brought them into their product, it felt more innovative. So I like to think about how TikTok feels like a very innovative new platform. But the idea of user-generated video existed for a long time. And the idea of algorithmic home pages existed for a long time. But when you combine those two ideas together, you get something that feels really fresh and new. Next, I wanted to talk a little about stakeholder management. So this is a huge part of so many product managers' roles. And it can be a little intimidating at first. And what I found is that a lot of the time when I had a disagreement with somebody or when I got really confused and we like couldn't come to a resolution, what was really happening is that I didn't understand my stakeholders as much. So for example, there was a time when the salespeople on our team kept asking for a new feature so that our product would demo better. And I sort of dismissed this idea. I was like, why do you want something that just demos better rather than that's like actually functionally useful? Like we should be caring about delivering real value, not just like making us look nice and shiny. But after a little while and hearing this again, I was like, I decided to get curious and really talk to that salesperson and try to understand, what were their goals? What were they afraid of? How does their job really work? And through that, I was able to, sit on some more sales calls, understand how these demos and these sales conversations went, and see that if we weren't able to capture the emotions of the people that we were trying to sell to, that we would greatly decrease our chance of ever selling to these decision makers. And that meant that the hundreds or thousands of people at their company would never even get a chance to use our tool. And so when they kept saying it has to demo better, what they were really saying is that the decision makers need to have an emotional investment and emotionally feel how buying this product is going to make their whole team more successful. And so I was able to reframe what they were saying as a customer problem. And then we were able to come up with a solution that we both agreed with. So when I'm approaching disagreements with a stakeholder, what I like to do is try to figure out what of three types of disagreements are we having? One of them could be that we're disagreeing on information. So maybe, for example, in this case, the salesperson had this information about how people did the purchasing decision that I just didn't know. And once I learned that, then we quickly agreed and we understood the importance of these new functionality. The next thing is we could have a difference in assumptions. So this could be a place where I think that this feature will demo better, and they think this one will demo better. Or I think that this will create more user growth, and I think this will create more user growth. And that's where we go back to that idea of validation and try to take the small, quick way of learning, of running something by a real user. So maybe we talk to one customer and see which of these approaches is more compelling. Maybe we run a quick A/B test. Maybe we look at the data and see what parts of the product that our customers are really using. The third type is a disagreement on values. And I think this is the most interesting kind of disagreement, because when you have a disagreement on values, what you really have is a strategic disagreement. So if I think that it's most important to go after user growth and you think it's most important to go after revenue, or I think that we should be very cautious and not take any risks with our customers, and you think it's okay to launch a risky change that might increase revenue a lot, but might also upset some people. Whenever we notice these, it really helps to reframe it as a strategic discussion. So forget about the details of what feature you're trying to build, or what decision you're trying to make, and take it up a level to the strategy of like, what level of risk tolerance do we want to have as a company? Do we think is best for us? Which goals do we think it's more important to pursue, revenue or user growth at this point in time? And by framing it as a strategic conversation, sometimes you and your stakeholder will come to an agreement once you frame it that way. But sometimes you'll realize that there needs to be other people in the room. That once you realize this is a strategic decision, you'll decide that you should be bringing in more senior leadership, or that there's other stakeholders who should be involved, and then you can set up the appropriate people to make that decision, and then you can come back to your original disagreement, and that should be easy to solve once you've solved the strategic question. So now I want to move on to careers and really career advancement, because this is one of the things that I really didn't see when I was new in my career. I sort of thought that shipping products is all there was, and I would get better and better at shipping products until one day I was magically CEO. And as I grew as a PM, I learned very quickly that that's not what the job is. And in fact, me and many people hit this plateau in our career where we want to get advanced, we want to keep getting better, but we're not able to move forward because we get told, the dreaded, you're not being strategic enough. So what does that mean? We're going to go up to strategy a little bit more on the next slide, but there really is the shift from a time in your career when being a great product manager means shipping great products that delight customers and hit the goals, to the second phase where being a great product manager means creating winning strategies that go after new opportunities and set ambitious goals. That where really what you're doing is deciding what's the North Star, what's the future your team wants to go after, and being able to have this broader, bigger picture view of what success looks like. So a lot of a product manager's career is improving in product strategy and expanding your influence that way. But as you enter people management, you might again hit this plateau where being a great PM and being a great product leader is really a different kind of job again. You enter this third phase of your career where it's all about organizational excellence. So this means that great product leaders are those who are able to create a great team that can ship great products and create winning product strategies. So here, about half your job is looking to the organization below you. How do you hire people? How do you coach and develop them? How do you mentor them? How do you set up the processes that are going to help them be really successful? And then the other half of the job here is really looking up and around. So not just creating a strong organization below you, but being a strategic advisor to the rest of the company and helping the entire company succeed. So your success is not just the success of your team, it's how you're able to translate team success into full company success. So digging into product strategy, when people say, what does it mean to be more strategic? What I found through some trial and error and a few times of like, here's my strategy, that's not a strategy, what do you mean? Is that there's really these three parts of product strategy. So if you have all three of these together, then you have a complete strategy. And you can create these strategies at multiple levels. So there might be a product strategy for all the products in your organization. And then there might be some for a particular product line, and then for a product in there, and then even for a product area. And anytime you have a team that's going to be working on more than one related project in a row, you can create a strategy for them. So the first part is the product vision. This is your inspiring picture of what the future can be like. And this is where you really sort of paint it like an infomercial. You talk about the pain today. It's so tough that teams have all this work about work and waste their time in endless status meetings. And then you paint this inspiring picture of like, imagine a future where checking off the tasks on your own to-do list magically update the centralized system, which then can predict the bottlenecks in your project and suggest smart allocation changes to keep your projects running on time. So you really draw that infomercial of like, here's the future I want to build. And then you can use that in a lot of ways. You can motivate the people on your team. You say, this is what we're building, this is the meaning behind the work you're doing. You can use it to recruit people to your team and say, like, don't you want to come work with me on this exciting vision? You can validate it with your customers. So you show them the vision. You can talk them through it and say, like, isn't this an exciting vision? Would you be excited to be in this future? And if they say, nah, I don't know, it's not really a top problem for me, then it's sort of an anti-validation, that you still need some work there. And you'll also use this to gain resources for your team. So you can create a strategy and a vision for a product that doesn't even exist yet. And you can go to executives and say, like, don't you want to build this? Don't you want to achieve this future? Like, can I spin up a new team to start working towards this vision? So your vision does the inspiration work. Then you get to your strategic framework. And this is where you're really laying out what are your big bets, your big strategic bets on how you're going to win a marketplace. So here you'll talk about who is your target customer and what are the product pillars? What are your core beliefs about the key things your product needs to do to succeed in the marketplace and win? So for example, with Asana early on, we had this idea that Asana worked like your team brain. It keeps all the teams at your company working effortlessly together. And so what does a good brain need? Well, it needs to know all the information about work. And it needs to be able to draw insightful connections between the information about work. And it needs to always be with you. So we had that wasn't exactly our pillars, but you kind of get the sense that we would be able to describe what are the big bets we're making and the big investment areas that we want to go after. What would success look like in each of those? And then we can have a discussion on that strategic framework with all of the people at the company, stakeholders, and really use that as the tangible, as like the tangible documentation that we would have discussions based off of. So if I thought it was really important to focus on improving our ability to understand work, we could contrast that with someone else who thought it was really important to help customers feel like a lot of delight and love in their as they're doing their work. So it really gives you a focal point for those conversations so that you can drive alignment. And the third part is the roadmap. So this is sort of the way that you work backwards from your vision to what are all the pieces you'll need to do to get there. And when you draw out this roadmap, especially if you draw it working backwards, so you say, we want to achieve this vision in 3 years, what are we going to have to do each quarter to get there? This isn't a commitment, but what it is it's another way to double check the pace of work you're doing and the types of work you're doing. A lot of the time you'll draw out this roadmap, and what you'll find is that at the pace you're currently working, there's no way you'll achieve your vision. And that can be that wake-up call to say, like, okay, what do we need to change? Should we take one of those projects that we were planning on getting to for a few years and bring it up sooner? Do we need to hire new people so that we'll have the right people on the team to achieve this vision? All of those together help you sort of drive that alignment and that forward planning so that you'll be able to make that progress. And the top question I get when I talk about strategy with people after we've described what it is they're like, okay, this sounds great, but I don't know how I'm ever going to have the time to do this. You know, my team needs me all the time. So what I really recommend to people is to go to your calendar and just block off 3 to 6 hours as your time to start drafting your product strategy. And to do this, sometimes you need to do some mental jumps to say, like, I'm going to pretend that I'm out of the office. I'm going to pretend that I have a doctor's appointment or that my friend has a wedding, and I will just protect this time on my calendar, turn off my notifications, and really focus on getting my thoughts down here. Because and I really like using those doctor appointments and the idea of the wedding, because there are things where, like, if you had a doctor's appointment, you would be okay to stay away from work. If your friend was getting married, you would take a Friday off. So you really sometimes have to really, like, create that space and give yourself the permission to block off that time and use it just for the strategic work. Once you get that started, now you'll have the beginning parts to start having conversations with your team members. And that's when you can start making your vision in a collaborative way. And that will really help you get forward. So digging into the roadmap again, a good roadmap is like a charcuterie board. So on your charcuterie board, you don't want to have all meats or all cheeses or all fruits. You really want a good balance between all of those. And so as you're picking which things you're going to buy for your charcuterie board, you don't stack rank all of your, like, grapes against your Gouda. You think about, you know, which cheeses do I want and what are my best cheeses? What are my best fruits? And you can do exactly the same thing for your roadmap. So instead of saying, like, okay, how do I decide between this small improvement to fix some bugs in a feature we already launched and this brand new feature that's going to drive user growth, and this brand new feature is going to drive revenue growth, and this thing is going to drive technical debt. You don't need to stack rank those all against each other. And it's really, really hard if you try to. So instead, what you can do is at a high level, decide how you want to bucket the investments that your team makes. And then you can pick the best work within each bucket. This is also a great way to handle stakeholder management, because if you have multiple different stakeholders, maybe a marketing stakeholder, a sales stakeholder, maybe a publisher stakeholder, each of those stakeholders might be caring about different goals, but you can think about at a high level, how much investment do we want in each of those goals? And that way you can talk to stakeholders just about the bucket that you've set aside for their goals. And in that case, they really can be helping you to prioritize the work within that bucket without needing to touch or even discuss or think about all of the other types of investments your team is doing. And the last of the prepared slides I have here is the importance of partnering with your manager on your career goals. So one of the things that surprised me a bunch while I was researching the book is that people really have a very, very wide set of career goals. For me, I'd kind of assumed everybody wants to climb the ladder as fast as possible. But there are many people who never want to become a people manager, or people who, rather than getting promotions, really want to sort of focus on the kind of work that's more meaningful to them. So it's important to think about your goals and discuss them with your manager in this forward-looking way. So you can say, I'd really love to become a people manager someday. What can we focus on now? What can you and I partner together on to focus on now so that I'll be ready when the opportunity comes up? By making it forward-looking, you're really able to bring your manager onto your side so they feel like they are here helping you achieve your goals rather than being the person who is blocking you and telling you you're not ready yet. Next, you can really learn their goals, because when you understand their goals, you can find these win-wins where for them, for example, they might be trying to do less work on strategy and more on organizational excellence. And that's an opportunity for you to apprentice with them and take over some of that strategic work. And finally, I want to talk about proactively sharing your work. So it's important as PMs and for any job to kind of self-advocate, to advocate for yourself. But that's really hard because your manager isn't always in the room to see what you're doing. And you don't want to sound like you're bragging when you're, kind of sharing the great work you've done. So the template that works really well for this is 3 parts. You say, here's the challenge I'm facing. Here's what I'm thinking of doing about it, or here's what I'm planning to do about it. What do you think? And you can use this 3-part template. Works really well because you can use it for both good news and bad news, and things where you know what to do and things where you don't know what to do. The first part, the challenge, you're like, hey, I just found out that there's been this terrible data migration error and we might have to move the launch. So now you're keeping them informed. Now you've got here's what I'm planning to do about it. So now you get to really brag and show off your good work. You get to say don't worry, I'm on top of it. I've got the plan. Let me just tell you all the great things I'm thinking about doing. And if your ideas are great, then you got to show them off. If they're not, you were still able to show ownership by trying to take your best guess. You're so I guess what I'm planning to do about it is send out an email about the launch date change. But you're at least able to show how far you went and show that ownership. And then this last part of what do you think really softens the bragging of it and makes it into a collaboration. So now you're not just telling them to brag, but you're actually curious, inviting their advice, which people love to give. So it really makes that a better conversation. And whether they're going to add a little bit on top of what you said or send you another direction, they will appreciate that you proactively asked for that advice. And that really sort of shows more seniority and more ownership of your work. So with that, we're going to move into questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jackie. That was awesome. I love the part about the conflict with the stakeholder and taking the emotion out of the. I may be putting words in your mouth, but taking emotion out of the conversation, moving it back to goals or values, right? So things that are not arguable and not personal, right? That's ultimately a great conflict resolution technique. I was taking notes over here. I will put a quick plug in for the book. I bought the book in preparation for this and started reading through it. And when I first got it, I picked it up out of the box and thought, that is a lot of words. There are many words in here, and it sounds like a backhanded compliment. I'm gonna work into a full-fledged compliment if you'll stay with me on this. So my first thought was, holy crap, there's like over 500 words in here, or 500 pages, and I'm not a good reader. What I loved about the book is very quickly in the early stages of it, there's a TLDR section that says, if you're this type of person, just read these sections. And I was like, that's fantastic. You're speaking my language, and maybe lots of busy people's language. And then, and here's where the full-fledged compliment comes in. I ended up reading the whole thing. I started with the TLDR and said, all right, I don't have time for this, 500 pages of nonsense. Let me just get to the important stuff. Because most books, honestly, are bloated essays, right? Most business books are bloated essays, right? You don't really need the 250 pages. They just can't justify the sticker price. There's actually 500 pages worth of quality stuff in here, like legitimate, like not blowing smoke. I started with the let me sneak in and get what I need. And it's a reference book. Ethan and I have talked about this. Ethan has a teaching background, and he's like, people will teach college classes over this book. So thank you so much for producing this book and talking with us today.
I'm going to jump in real quick too. It's the way it's broken down by section. You can look at different aspects of product management because it's so broad. Again, really excited to have you here, Jackie. This book is phenomenal, and we're not just saying that. It's on our bookshelves and we're using it. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Cool. So I crafted a couple questions. I want to start with those, and then I can see the Q&A starting to fill up, and we'll read from that as well. You talked about, I love the part about the strategy, like blocking off for yourself. I think in talking to a lot of people, I hear they're not working in product-led organizations. They may be, to use the term feature factory or something along those lines. And you touched on one bit of it where a stakeholder brings you, I want this, right? And you talked about kind of working backwards and say, let's work back to the problem. Any advice to someone to start to change the culture of a company that operates that way? It's an uphill battle, and I don't expect one person to kind of completely stem the tide, but anything else you can speak to there that starts to change the tide to really explain what a product manager can do for an organization if we use product in the way that we all expect product to be used?
Yeah. One of the things that I learned when I was researching this book was just the special world that you can be in when you work in a company that's not like product first or didn't start off with this like product practice. A lot of times these are some of the best companies to work at because they are companies that are working on really important problems, things that industries that have been around for a long time that were able to get to where they are without this strong product practice. So by adding in your own product practices, you can sort of be this multiplier on the quality of the work that gets done at that company. But there is this trade-off where you're going to have to be one of these change makers. You're one of these people that are going to have to slowly and respectfully bring people over and sort of help them understand the value of some of these product best practices. So some of the things that I've learned work really well here. One of them is keep respect at kind of the top of mind here. I think that if you come in with an idea that the other people at your company are too old-fashioned or unwilling to change, or if you come in with this idea that the reason that they don't accept your best practices is because of a personality fault of theirs, you're gonna have a lot of time coming to a conclusion that works for both of you. But if you're really able to empathize with them, understand what their goals are, understand what things have been working for them and why, then you can also start to bring in like what's not working for them. Like they hired you for a reason. There must be something that they're finding that isn't working as well for them. And what you can do is really start with their goals, understand what their goals are, what they want to achieve, and show and start by sort of planting the seeds, reward them with a cupcake of it, say like, look, this is what we can get you. I can help you achieve your own goals by doing these product best practices. So there are so many different ways that PMs can help. But by focusing on sort of their pain points and relieving those, you can start to earn credibility and trust. And that's really important. Once they trust you, once they feel like you understand what they care about and that you value the same things that they do and that you're confident and you know how to deliver, then you start to earn the credibility where you can start to risk some of that credibility on bringing in more advanced PM practices or things that they maybe wouldn't trust you to do on your first month at the job.
That makes sense. That's a lot of one of the top issues that I hear from people in our membership is, they're at the PM level and they're looking to find their way up. They want to get upstream so that they can affect the roadmap, right? So when you touched on, at least if nothing else, taking over the strategy of your area. I was talking to someone last night and they asked me to ask you this question. They're operating in the PM scope where they have access to their product metrics or their feature metrics, right? So they know I add a button and 80% more people click this button. So that's a success. But they don't understand how that impacts, and they're not getting the visibility at a higher level of how that hits like top line revenue, right? Profitability of the company. And they're looking to sort of climb their way up into it. Any advice to kind of get out of what your defined scope is? Not that you're necessarily looking to take on, but get more context out of the success for the company so that you can potentially be part of it ultimately, but also do a better job in your day-to-day.
Yeah, so a lot of this will depend on your company culture. Depending on the culture, some of them you might have to skip level meetings where you can meet your manager's manager, or you might have some access to them where you can talk to them. And this is always a great opportunity to ask them about their strategy. Ask them about like what keeps you up at night. What are you most excited for in the future? How do you see the part that I'm responsible for fitting into the bigger picture? So sometimes you can talk directly. Sometimes people have an open door policy. You can like sign up for office hours and talk to them. Other times they might have presentations that they've given that you're able to watch and learn from. Some cultures though are going to be more hierarchical. And then you might be able to go through, work through your manager, because your manager will at least have access to some higher up people and they can have higher up. So this is actually a way you think about it as like, how can I make my manager look good? How can I give them the context and the evidence I have from what I have, from what my product area is, to see how that could hypothetically translate into really success for the rest of the company, or try to pull more of that strategy down. So at the very least, like you can ask your manager what they've been hearing and what they're hearing in their other meetings. And if there's something that's maybe 2 levels above them, they can start asking that to their manager and bring that in, and they'll be able to raise their own strategic influence. So then once you learn that, really the trick is I think of it as connecting the dots. So you have your area, that adding this button can increase clicks by 80%. Really connect the dot to the area that your manager owns and like what goals they care about. And then try to learn how does that connect the dots to what the person above them owns and what metrics they care about, what their key goals are. Sometimes your company might publish your OKRs or company objectives, and you can look at those as well for these signs of what's important at the highest level. And then whenever you're doing your work, try to describe that pathway from the work you're doing to that larger purpose and those larger company goals, because that really frames your work in a strategic way.
Awesome, spot on. Someone asked this in the Q&A, and it was something that I had as well. You talk a lot about, so in the different stages, so in that early stage when you're in the PM stage and the shipping, right? Really good at shipping, and someone makes their path to being a senior PM. And you mentioned in the book, like no one's going to promote you until you kind of master, and again, I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit, master that area. What is it that you've seen? So, there are certainly hard skills that may be valued by your organization, running better user interviews, learning a new multivariate testing framework, and any of that kind of stuff. But what are the things that you've seen in your experience and in your research that describes what someone who makes the jump from PM to senior PM, what is it that they're able to, like, what makes a great, a great PM that becomes a senior PM versus just your standard average PM?
Yeah, so there's sort of 3 areas I think that really define that leap. So there's going to be strategy, autonomy, and nuance. So strategy is a lot of what we talked about on those slides, of being able to like create a strategy, identify new opportunities for your team to go after, and then successfully get your team to go after those. So it's not just the ideas, but actually the execution of directing a team to achieve one of those strategies. And so we went into that a lot. The other 2 areas are going to be autonomy and nuance. So autonomy is this idea that you can be trusted to run your team on your own. So the earlier levels before senior PM, you're sort of learning how to be a great PM. you are like learning like, okay, I'm starting a new project. Who do I need to talk to? And you might need to like ask your manager, or like, what are the approval steps I need to go through? How do I resolve a conflict with my designer? These are all like very normal things that anybody new to the job needs to learn as they go. For a senior PM, this is somebody that I expect that if a manager went on vacation for 3 weeks, it's not that their team, that everything would go absolutely perfectly. Like usually they'll ask for lots of input from the manager. But their team wouldn't fall apart. They would be able to move their team and continue on and know what to do, even if their manager was gone for weeks at a time. They're really somebody who knows how to do it and is able to do that and has earned the trust to do it and takes on that autonomy. So they actually do move forward without needing a lot of nudging and assistance from other people. And then this last part is this nuance. So judgment is a huge part of the senior PM level. And what I've really seen is that people who are new to the PM career, especially, and I hope my new book doesn't cause more of this problem, but people love to like memorize frameworks. So they'll be like, oh, okay, I know the right way to do this. I like add these two numbers together and the answer is like my stack rank order of the prioritization for what work we should do. Or like, which bug is more important? Like, okay, we just plug it all into a formula and we have an answer. Or I use this framework and now I've got the right answer. So a lot of what moving into that senior PM role is moving away from the idea that there's a single right answer and instead moving to this world of it depends. And but not in a like, oh, like what's the answer? It depends. I'm done. But rather saying it depends and then following that up with like it depends on these different things. And also here's my belief of what situation we're in. So you can say like, should we work, is it more important to work on user growth or revenue growth? And you can say, well, it depends, are we in an industry that, for example, like if we have do we have fundraising coming up and are there specific metrics that we need to hit? Or are we in a place where we really can choose for ourselves? Are we in a very competitive industry where we need to earn market share first and then boost our revenue? Or is it going to be more important to raise revenue, to earn revenue now so that we actually can continue to fund the research we need to be able to move forward and continue to grow in this market? So really that nuance, seeing the nuance in almost every situation and being able to navigate it and keep this awareness of places where there could be more than one right answer, I find it is a third distinguishing characteristic of senior PMs.
It's counterintuitive, right? Like you would think that it would get easier, like exactly like you said, you memorize the framework and now you can just do the math in your head, right? So that means you're really good at it as opposed to the more vague, ambiguous answer, but with follow-up, right? Not just it depends and in the conversation.
Yes, and actually, so one thing I think that can kind of counter that the irony of it is that as a senior PM, there are going to be some easy questions on your team, but you should have already shared your frameworks with your teammates so they could answer those without having to ask you. So it's not that there's never an easy question. It's just that if the easy questions are coming to you, that means you haven't empowered your team to answer them on their own. So great senior PMs are getting the hardest questions.
Oh, that's a great point. Building knowledge within your organization. So we have a question from the Q&A about moving from an individual contributor to a manager. And that's something you talk about, right? It's kind of making the jump into that next phase. I wonder, kind of addressing that and maybe a little additional color. Are there things how do you get someone to give you a chance, right? If you're not in that situation where someone's just saying, cool, I'm going to hire you a first time to be a manager of people now, are there things that you could do in order to demonstrate it, in order to help ease that jump?
Nice. Yeah, definitely. So the first thing I would say is that you do have to be a good PM before you can become a PM manager. And this seems like kind of obvious to me at this point, but I know that it's not obvious to everybody. Some people think that like, okay, they're two different jobs. Why can't I like never learn how to execute on my team and just hire someone below me to do that? And that's not how it works. People won't trust you to become a manager and coach other people on these skills unless you're already doing a good job at this PM job. And usually you have to be in the senior PM. You have to have made the senior PM level before your company will even consider making you a people manager. So let's say that you're good at your job, you're a senior PM, things are going well. What can you do to get that chance to become a people manager? I think there's two main areas. One is going to be mentorship. And I think it's amazing that the PMLA has this mentorship opportunity. I think that could be a great way to show those mentorship skills. But you can do mentorship within your company. You can do it to other PMs, to non-PMs, but really building this ability to help other people grow in their job. And when you do mentoring, you're not only helping other people develop their skills, but also it helps you refine your own framework and actually improve your own skills of how you understand the PM role. So showing this interest in this way of mentorship is one of the big ones. Another big one is, I mentioned that organizational excellence isn't just has these other attributes to it. So organizational excellence is really about building a strong team. So mentorship is an obvious one that people think of, but there are other things that people consider as well. And I think process is a big one here. So a common path that I see for people who become people managers is that before they were a people manager, they took on a leadership role in the PM team, owning and driving some of the important processes that happen. So this might mean that they ran the team meetings, for example, or some regularly recurring meeting. It might mean that they were creating new templates for the teams to use or new trainings for the teams to use. I think related to this, there's other organizational excellence things like recruiting, offering to take on more interviews or to pitch people on the roles. I think that many PMs hate process and many PMs hate recruiting. But first of all, if you hate these, you might not enjoy being a people manager. But also, if you are being vocal about how much you dislike these, it'll be an anti-signal to your managers and the other people around you that you might not be a great match for this role. So taking on mentorship opportunities and organizational excellence opportunities, like improving processes and recruiting, I think are two things you can do to really show that you might be ready for the role.
Awesome. Here's another one. So it talks about, we've talked about learning from the mistakes of others. What advice do you have for PMs to find mentors outside their immediate circle or organization? So I think this is someone looking for a mentor, particularly as they transition from individual contributor to leadership roles, where there's simply fewer people who've been in that position.
Yeah. So I usually try to find, I think the idea of finding like a general purpose mentor can be pretty kind of confusing and tough. I've actually found that my best mentorship is usually coming from my manager. They know my job very well. You can also go to your manager's peers because they will be close enough to your work to have some real insights, and they've often seen your work, but they have a little bit of an outsider view, so they might be able to give you a different kind of feedback that can be really helpful. So definitely manager and manager's peers is a great starting resource. And then beyond that, I think it can be helpful to think about having multiple managers for the multiple different, or multiple mentors for the multiple different types of things that you want to learn. So for example, when our company did internationalization, we didn't really have any experience in internationalizing a product. So I went and I talked to lots of other companies and I was like, does anyone have done internationalization before? And we were able to connect our internationalization PM to someone who had done internationalization at many other startups. And so they were able to get like special purpose mentoring on the specific thing that they were trying to grow in. I think similar things can happen if you're on a growth team trying to find someone that can help you with growth mentoring and those practices. And that helps not only because it sort of reduces the pressure from a single person mentoring you, but also when you have a goal in mind, it'll start that conversation off a lot better. You'll actually have like a specific question to start off with. And that's a much easier way to start to get mentorship. Because if somebody says like, hey, do you have any best practices for internationalization? That's much easier to either shoot back an email or be like, yeah, let's hop on a quick call and do that. Rather than if you get an email, it's like, will you be my mentor? And then people are like, I don't know what I'm signing myself up for. I'm a little bit afraid I'm going to say no.
Yeah, and that's also to put a plug in for PMA. If you're not a member, being part of an organization like this, I'm not going to miss an opportunity like that. This is we have these types of meetings. There's more and more opportunities where we have peer-to-peer relationships. So stay connected to PMA. We're going to help try to solve that problem as well. Here's another question from the group. Responsibilities and competencies for PMs can be tough to formalize. And I know there's a section in the book that you talk about, like the career matrix. How have you approached assessing your direct reports in a fair and consistent way?
Yeah, great question. So one of the big premises I have in my book is that these career ladders are confusing and misleading, and can be misleading. So I have personally created career ladders for my reports at work. But what I've found with these is that I think that they actually can be, I think they can be very effective for a manager trying to level the people below them, but they're not very useful for a person to try to get themselves promoted. Um, and the reason is that these career ladders, they look like they're checklists, or that they like, but they're not going to be applied consistently. So they often are in terms of skills or things you've done. But that is not what the levels really are about. The levels are going to be about scope, autonomy, and impact. So what I mean by that is scope is like, what's the size of your responsibility? Somebody who is responsible for an entire suite of products is going to be a higher level than someone who's responsible for a feature. And there's a catch-22 there, right? Like, you're kind of hired into your scope, and you need to sort of prove yourself to be given an opportunity to do a larger scope. So even if you have all the skills to run an entire product line, you're not going to be the higher level until you've actually gotten that chance. And so you need to sort of, and I've got some parts in this book of like the specific things you can do to kind of bootstrap to get those next opportunities. But you do need to actually like get into a role that has that scope. Then there's the autonomy, which is that part of like, how much have you earned trust? And then how much do you act responsibly with that trust? So are you for the different three parts for shipping products, product strategy, and organizational excellence, are you learning how to do them? Do you know how to do them? And do you know them so well that you can teach other people how to do them? Is how I might describe that like level of autonomy you're at. And then finally, the impact. So when you get hired into a level, you haven't really had delivered any impact yet at your company, but you're hired in to have an expectation of the impact that you can have. So for example, the lower levels, you're expected to ship products that like kind of hit the goals they were given and don't really mess anything up. But at the higher levels, you're expected to have like really change, be influential in the direction and the success of the company as a whole. So the size of the impact you're having, and whether this impact, and especially I think about it as impact relative to expectations. So for example, if I take an APM and I stick them on a monetization project and we're doing a pricing change, like we know that's going to bring in a lot of revenue. It might have been straightforward already, and all the controversy might have already been decided. So it doesn't mean that just because they did the pricing change that brought in extra millions of dollars, doesn't mean that they necessarily like automatically become a higher level. It's sort of relative to the expectations and the complexity of that role. So in order to advance, you really need to be showing that impact. In terms of fairness, though, I do think it is important to have these rubrics. They just are only going to make sense once you're already a manager. So for example, they will often list out like, these are the qualities and the things we typically see of somebody who is at this level versus this level. Like we typically see somebody at this level has this deep understanding of how to ship things in the product lifecycle, and therefore they're able to make like wise shortcuts. But all of those are more of descriptions of what someone at that level looks like, rather than like you need all of these to make it to the level. And then the last thing I would say in terms of evaluating people is the really high level way I look at it is the way that I evaluate the success of a PM is the success of what they've shipped combined with their peer reviews. Because what we're hiring a PM to do is to deliver these outcomes, to deliver this great impact. And so generally shipping successful products, hitting your OKRs, having ambitious OKRs and hitting them is generally what a good product manager does. But a good product manager can be on a bad team, and a bad product manager can be on a good team. So I like to use the peer feedback to sort of calibrate within this level of success, how much of that should the PM be getting credit for.
There's a number of questions in here about remote. And I think it probably depended on the situation that you were in before. I know my company is distributed. So now that we went remote, it just, some of us aren't sitting in the same office, but I'm still dealing with people from Canada and Atlanta and Denver. And but I think, so there's so much of product. We've talked about like the strategic portion. There's the tactical. Anyone can bury their head in Jira anywhere in any coffee shop in the world. But so much of the strategic often would happen maybe pre-COVID in the hallways, right? Or the relationship building. And any tips for working in a remote world in order to kind of help with that, or maybe even for a new PM starting at a company that needs to build those relationships?
Yeah, relationships, you hit the nail on the head, is that's the important part. So a few different things. One is like use the first few minutes of every meeting as relationship building. Ask people about how their day is going, ask them how their weekend was. Like just put extra effort into using that time to see each other as human beings who have a life outside of work, and really to help the other person know that you see them and you care about them. So that's one area that you can do for relationship building. Another is I've been a big fan for a long time, so I've worked on many cross office teams, is to have various channels where you can basically mix some work and some fun. So a Slack channel where you occasionally send memes to each other or pictures of your cats, or tell jokes, or have some way where you're able to have some experiences with your coworkers that are like fun and good, and you have that experience of feeling like you like each other, because all of that will be a good foundation for when you have to have those tough conversations, and it makes it easier to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. So those would be sort of the relationship building tactics. The other two things about remote work, one of them is to be proactive about communication overload. When people are remote, it's very tempting for people to chime in on a reply all to a thread that ends up going out to hundreds and thousands of people. And I find that it's the product manager's job to sort of set the communication norms on the team, and sometimes even step in and be like, look, we don't, every time you send a message to 100 people, that's 100 people that have to spend a minute reading your message. We need to be more careful and not reply all, and not communicate unless we're really adding something to the conversation. And so sometimes PMs have to kind of be the person who steps in and sets those norms, and kindly ask some people to be a little bit quieter on the large channels to free up time. And I think those are the top of my ones for me right now. But I bet other people can add some to the chat if they have some really good remote tips.
And hopefully all of this is a moot point. Vaccines come in, cure this thing. We're all back to Ethan is the eternal optimist. Every time we have a conversation, we're going to get back to the old world with what we've learned from this experience, right? So we actually get to a better place. So here's a good one that only you can answer. Any plans to read the book for an Audible edition?
This is a great question. I have been trying to get in contact with anyone who has an Audible version of their book and sort of get a sense of how many people read them and what the sales are like on there. So if there was enough demand, I'd be open to it.
I mean, I can tell you, having it, I have it folded out in front of my keyboard right now. Having the tactile version, being able to refer to it as a reference book and bounce around, I would recommend people buy the book. I think that it's a better experience. But if you can get an amazing voice actor like a Christopher Walken or something like that to read the book, that would be fantastic, and I would certainly buy that version.
Yeah.
So we are at time. I did not get through the questions; just keep coming in. But we are at time, and I want to be respectful. So thank you so much to Jackie for this talk. And again, I can't say enough nice things about the book. Again, it seemed heavy and overwhelming at first, and now it feels like a godsend. So I thank you so much for producing that and spending time with us here today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if people have extra questions, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so tweet at me and I'll try to get back to you.
And your Twitter handle is?
At Jackie Bo. JACKIEBO.
Awesome. Everybody go follow Jackie and tweet at her. Cool. Everybody, we were cognizant of time. It's 1 o'clock. I'm sure you've got meetings to run to. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and we'll see you at the next event.